Well, the truth is because they're financially incentivized to do so. But regardless, they've ignored all of these things and said, you know what? We still think XRP is bad because it doesn't have this mining functionality. But the truth is maybe there is another side of it to the story. This was posted earlier today, and I thought it was extremely interesting. It's the if I were Ripple theory, and this was put out by Digital Asset Investor. He says, if I would Ripple, I would create an XRP escrow. I would option parts of the escrow to institutions and governments for later use, essentially giving institutions and governments the right to purchase part of the escrow without necessarily having to go through this convoluted mining scheme, right? They don't care about it. They're not going to do it. They have other things they have to focus on. I would make everyone assume that I owned it all and keep XRP off my balance sheet. I would grow Ripple into a massive infrastructure company for over a decade. When I was ready to go IPO, I would reveal who owned what, put my position of XRP on the balance sheet, and drive the value of the company and XRP to the moon as I announce XRP's development and deployment. That's just what I would do. Now, what I think is so interesting is, in my opinion, this is essentially exactly what Ripple has decided. Ripple realized that the idea of a whole bunch of random people getting access to Bitcoin and mining Bitcoin, it's problematic. Ripple understood from the very early days that the most important people in the financial system were not going to be the first people into crypto. But you want the most important people in the financial system to have the biggest stake in the most important assets that are going to dictate and run the future financial system. If all the early people who originally got into Bitcoin, right, were obviously not financial institutions, they were just people who figured out about this stuff early, really tech nerds at the end of the day. If all those people have a disproportionate amount of the Bitcoin, well, now none of the big financial institutions that are actually going to make up the bulk of the transactions that are going to be happening have any real Bitcoin in comparison to these early tech nerds. Ripple took a very different strategy. Because Ripple owned all the XRP, they could pick where it was distributed and make sure there were allotments and allocations to the important financial institutions to have an actual stake in the network. Why would these large financial conglomerates choose to operate on a network that they have no economic power over? Obviously, they are going to want to be the biggest fish. They are going to want to be the biggest players in the pond. They don't want to be dealing in a network owned and economically controlled by a whole bunch of early tech nerds, right? They want to be the biggest player. And by Ripple controlling the supply and distributing the supply to those players who matter, it's not to say that XRP is somehow centralized because of it. XRP is just being decentralized into stakeholders who matter.